All right. Hi, Nancy. So before we start our interview, I was just wondering do you know anything about our Adjusting Stress project?
I do know that you hold a series of interviewing therapists, really getting an understanding of mental health and perspective from licensed clinicians, and really spreading the word of like psychoeducation and just breaking the stigma around mental health and what that looks like in the therapy environment.
Yeah, exactly. So, Adjusting Stress is a mental health initiative in order to address teen stress, which is a topic that doesn't really get talked about a lot, like teen mental health. And so, me and a couple other of my friends, we are all high schoolers, and I'm Abba, one of the founders. And so, we speak to, as you said, like health professionals, psychologists, therapists, individuals like you that can give us some kind of perspective on your experience of mental health from what you've experienced with your clients or whatever that might be. And we also share the stories of teens and their mental health stories as well. So, yeah. All right. To
Great.
start off, so could you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Yeah, so I'm Nancy Acevedo. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm licensed in the state of California. I've been practicing as a clinician for over 8 years now. I've been licensed for almost 4 years. Most of my clinical experience has actually been working with children, teenagers, and their families or caregivers. These were usually children who were system involved, meaning that they were either working with the foster care system, or they were in juvenile probation. And my role as a clinician was to support the family's needs, specifically the client, which was the child or teenager, in successfully completing or closing any system involvement with their family, whether that was successfully completing probation or successfully completing CWS case, if that was reunification with their family, whatever the treatment goals were for the family or the client specifically. So a lot of my clinical experience has been working with a lot of children, teenagers, and transitional aged youth and their families. Over the time, I've developed more experience working with adults at the moment. I actually recently opened up my own practice. It's called Rising with Resilience Therapy. And my goal with that was to really focus my clinical experience with reaching out to BIPOC folks. So, Black, Indigenous, people of color, specifically women, and really supporting them in achieving their goals and working through trauma, whether that's complex trauma, acute, generational, systemic trauma that they've dealt with in their past, in a very non-oppressive environment.
That's awesome. It's really inspirational. As you were saying about you are the owner and founder of Rising with Resilience Therapy. So can you just talk to us about why you started that or like why you went to the route of therapy as your career choice?
So the reason why I started it is because I think as a woman of color, as a first generation Latina, navigating the clinical field, I noticed that there weren't a lot of my, I didn't see a lot of me in a lot of the professors, especially when I started to branch out into private practice. There was a lack of representation. So my goal was to open up Rising with Resilience Therapy and be able to represent myself, a first generation Latina, and provide space for people like me, that look like me, people who have had similar experiences, to be able to find a place where they could experience community and be seen and heard. So that's really the vision or the mission of Rising with Resilience Therapy. And in terms of why I got into the clinical field, I think there's, like many people, I think we know someone, a loved one, who has experienced some sort of mental health issue. For myself, it was my mom. And that significantly impacted just my upbringing with her, really seeing the trauma that she went through and how that manifested in her parenting skills with us. um, really understanding that she was doing the best she could with what she had. And with that being said, that really inspired me to move in towards the field of psychology and mental health to really support women like her, women who were undocumented coming to a new country and really going through the traumas and the hardships of coming to a new country and learning a new language and navigating a new culture. So wanting to really support other women like that and what they've been through in a very healing environment.
That's really interesting because as like an Asian American myself, I feel like it's really important that underrepresented like minorities should be in career paths revolving around mental health because it's kind of not as shown with us, comparing to other different kinds of nationalities and minorities. So going back to that, um, as a first generation Latina, how do you think that's changed your perspective on mental health, if so?
I think it's really opened my eyes to the patterns that we were raised in, indoctrinated in, that we didn't realize we were being indoctrinated in. I think there was a lot of shame. Um, there's a lot of shame and guilt when it comes to mental health in the Latino culture, I would say. So I think that's really shifted for me, really being able to reflect on things that I thought that were really normal in my culture, and then coming and going through my own healing journey and realizing that a lot of the things that I thought was normal or appropriate in my childhood really wasn't, and it was more of a trauma response. That really opened my eyes to my own healing journey and really provided me a space to really build a lot of empathy and forgiveness towards my parents. Because for the longest time, as an early adult, I think there was a lot of anger towards my parents in regards to how they raised me and my siblings, and I couldn't really necessarily put couldn't really pinpoint what it was until I started my own healing journey. And I was able to understand their own trauma and how that showed up in their parenting skills with me. And that's pushed me to be able to heal more in regards to my upbringing.
So, what do you think is the number one issue that you've helped treat or improve among with your clients?
I would say shame. This idea of shame. Um, Shame likes to show its face in the darkness and secrecy. And in my sessions with clients, we invite shame in and we challenge it, right? I'm able to bear witness to the experiences that my clients have been through, and really breaking down the shame and guilt that they feel for themselves, and really validating their experiences. Because a lot of the time, many clients don't feel heard, they don't feel seen by other people, and they go through life feeling a lot of shame and guilt for some of the things that they've been through. And in these sessions with clients, I'm able to bear witness to what they've experienced and really validate their feelings around that, and really deconstruct this idea of shame that many people feel.
How do you think that stress could affect a teenager's body in a positive or negative way?
Well, stress can be beneficial, especially for teenagers, I think, in the sense of getting things done, right? They have so many expectations with their schoolwork, obligations at home, social obligations, extracurricular activities. So when there's a sense of stress, there's a sense of motivation to get things done, which I think within reason can be a healthy thing for teenagers. Now, when teenagers start to have an overload of stress, that can really take a toll on the body, right? Because teenagers are still developing their body, they're still their brain is still developing as well. So chronic stress can really have a significant impact in brain development and their own physical health as well, right? Because we know that stress can really show itself in chronic fatigue, chronic pain for individuals, migraines as well, and it can also start to really take a toll on self-esteem and confidence for teenagers as they're developing their own identity of who they are in the world as well.
And as you're an individual that's surpassed your teenage years, how do you think your coping mechanisms have changed from when you were a teenager till now?
I would say that for me, I have a better understanding that coping skills is not a sign of weakness, that it's something that is necessary for me to continue practicing for my own well-being. Um, it's like I said, it's not a sign of weakness. It's something that is needed to continue to show up day in and day out. In order for me to fulfill obligations, I need to be able to feel like myself and feel like I have a full battery charge to be able to continue and show up for other people.
What are some tips that you have for teens that are struggling with anxiety right now?
I would say to look at someone in your life that you trust. Look at someone that is a safe person for you that you can turn to and talk to. Because many times teenagers, I think, really struggle in isolation. Like I said, there's a lot of shame that people may feel, especially teenagers, right? Because there's a lot of comparing themselves, especially nowadays with social media. There's this comparison as to what they should be doing or how they should look. Um, and they get very influenced with that. So I would say really looking at someone in your life that you really feel safe with and turning to them and having an open conversation with this person about what they're going through, what their struggles are, what anxiety feels like for them. Because I'm guessing this person, if they identify this person as a safe person, this person is going to support them in a healthy path. Because like I said, social media sometimes with influencers, sometimes there's misinformation being passed around. So I would really encourage teenagers to look at their support network and really lean on someone that they trust and feel very validated with.
What are some misconceptions that you have on the topic of, or misconceptions that not you have, but you think others have on the topic of therapy?
A few misconceptions is I think people think if you go to therapy, you're weak. If you go to therapy, you're quote crazy or that there's something wrong with you. I think those are very common misconceptions that people have. I also think that there's a misconception that therapy is a quick fix it, and there's nothing to fix with when it comes to an individual coming to therapy. I think people think that therapy is going to change things overnight, um, and that their therapist has all the answers. I think those are very common misconceptions. And what I would like to say is that your therapist doesn't have all the answers. Your therapist is merely a guide, a support, someone that will cultivate a safe environment for you to really explore your feelings and your thoughts and experiences in a very non-judgmental environment. Um, and that healing does take time. What you put into your healing process is what you're going to get out of it. And, you know, the 55 minutes that you spend in session isn't necessarily going to heal everything. A lot of it is what happens outside of session. So, really taking the tools and techniques that you learn in session and really applying them outside of session in your own environment.
And then adding on to that, what do you think are some misconceptions that are talked about among the topic of mental health?
Um, I think there's a lot of misconception with, like I was saying earlier before, like if someone says that they're having a hard time with anxiety or they're starting to feel a little depressed, I think there's stigma around that this person doesn't have their life together, or they may be seen as less than from other people. So I think there's this fear around talking about it and admitting to it, based on other people's judgments and opinions about mental health.
And then my very last question to you is, could you just give us like a message that you would like to relay on to our adjusting stress audience?
Yeah. So I want to say that you're not alone, that there are people out there that want to listen, that want to help. The support and help is out there. Um, I know that mental health at the moment with teenagers specifically, right? Anxiety, depression, even suicide is something that is increasing in our teenagers. And I just want to let them know that they're not alone and that help is out there. And seeking therapy is nothing to be ashamed of. That I want to empower your audience to know that therapists are out there that want to help, and empower them in terms of giving their own feedback to their own therapist and really finding the right person for you, because not every therapist will be the right fit for you, and that's okay. That's not to say that there's anything wrong with you, but it's more of finding that right person for you, that right therapist that hears you and sees you for who you are and can help you.
Okay, thank you so much, Nancy. I really appreciate you speaking to me about your experience with mental health and the story behind your therapy journey and everything like that. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. So
Thank you.
request to you is if you could just tell me a fun fact. You don't have to tell me now, you can let me know later, but just a heartwarming fun fact about you I can add on your bio. Some examples I've had in the past is one of the therapists said that she has to put 3 hot sauces on everything she eats. There's another therapist that lives in a van. There's one that has a pink car, just like something, joyous about you. Yeah.
Yeah, let me see. So I don't have kids, but I do have a fur baby. His name is Kobe, the cat. He's a black cat with some white right here. Is like a little tuxedo cat. And I love him very much. I love my cuddles with him. And actually, funny thing is that every time I come home from work, he is the first person I go and say hi to.
Aw, that's cute. Okay, thank you so much, Nancy, for
No problem.
have a great day. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You too. Bye bye.